Well, good evening, everyone. Noswaithal, welcome to the first of the winter talks organised by the CC4 Museum of Welsh Cricket for the period 2023-2024. I'm delighted to say that joining us this evening from his home in Chesterley Street in County Durham is the former Glamorgan and West Indies and Leicestershire and Durham bowler Ottis Gibson. Good evening, Ottis. How are you?
Good evening, Andrew. I'm great, thanks. Not bad at all.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I'm sure we're going to learn an awful lot more about your journey through county cricket, through international cricket, and your current role helping to coach and to develop the next generation of young cricketers. So let's go back, Ottis, way back, right to the very beginning. You were born in March 1969, a very important year, of course, in the history of Glamorgan County Cricket Club, the year when Tony Lewis's team clinched for the second time the county championship title. But you were born in the St. Peter's district, I gather, of Barbados. So could you fill us in on your very early years in, I believe, where you went to school in Black Rock? Is that right?
Yeah, Black Rock would come later on. Black Rock was the secondary school. So I was born in a little sort of, it would have been a farming village called, a sugarcane village called Spring Head. And that was actually in St. James. It's borders St. James and St. Peter, but that was actually in St. James. You know, to obviously, we were born on tenement land. I was born on tenement land, and that's where we were raised, myself and if you remember, a young cricketer called Vasbert Drakes, also from around that era. We were born in the same little village. Yeah, and it was, you know, a normal, haven't got much, so therefore not got much to worry about attitude to life as a young boy. We didn't have a lot. You know, but you know, we had, of course, loving household and stuff like that. And cricket or sport in general always played a part in at that time every young person's early childhood in Barbados, especially was revolved around cricket, because West Indies cricket team at the time was the dominant cricket team in the world, and every young person's aspirations was to be a budding West Indies cricketer, which, you know, I was lucky to do later on in my life. You know, so my early years growing up in Spring Head, you know, there's no running water in the house. There's none of that stuff. You got to go out and get your water. You've got livestock in the backyard, so you wake up in the morning before you go to school. You have to walk. I think my walk was about two miles to school. Before you go to school, you got to get up in the morning. You got to go and attend to your livestock in the backyard. Everybody was assigned chores, and mine was looking after the sheep, I think it was. And you'll go out and make sure the sheep were fed and watered before you then walk them out into the pasture and tie them out for the day. Then you come back and have a shower under the standpipe and get ready for school, you know, and you go to school. Sorry, and go to school, and again, school was fantastic, you know. Really enjoyed school in those young years. You know, but the school that we went to, St. Silas Primary School, there was actually no cricket field at the school, so we used to use the cricket field for the local club, which was in Orange Hill. So we used to use Orange Hill, the playing field there, and that's where most of my early cricket was played.
Were you always very much wanting to be a fast bowler, or did you dabble with spin bowling?
Well, I think I always wanted to be a fast bowler. What I was as a youngster was always quite curious. So in my early years, my growth spurt came later in life. So in the beginning, I wasn't very quick. Some might say I still ended up being not very quick, but in my early days, I wasn't very quick, but I could bowl a bit. And I also loved batting. I think most people and my friends and whatever would say in my early years, in my teens, I was probably a better batsman than a bowler. But then I had a growth spurt, and I put on some pace. In Barbados back in those days, um, apart from Sir Garfield Sobers as the greatest cricketer ever and outstanding all-rounder, if you couldn't bat, there wasn't much leeway for being an all-rounder. So if you turn up to under 19 trials and you were a bowler, you bowled, and if you were a batsman, you batted. And you hardly ever did both, So my batting suffered as a effect of my bowling getting better. Um, and therefore my batting never perhaps reached the potential that it could have done. But the funny thing about that also was that in my Black Rock days, which is in my Ellerslie secondary school days, then I actually bowled leg spin for my school, because I used to be, again, through my own curiosity, when we were practicing and I would finish my fast bowling spell, I would try and bowl a few leg spinners. And this coach that I had, the man called Irvin Harris at Ellerslie Secondary School, he saw some potential in my leg spin, and he encouraged me to keep working on my leg spin. So I would bowl fast, and then when I got tired, if we didn't have a leg spinner, then he would encourage me to bowl some leg spinning matches. So I have bowled leg spin in a few club matches.
Okay, who were your childhood heroes, Otis?
Well, my mother is my ultimate hero because she was single parent. She raised five of us. So she is, outside of all the. Often when you say who's your hero, people mention sports people, celebrities, and whatever. And my mother has always been, and she turned 80 this year, and she's still my ultimate hero. But when I was growing up, I wanted to bat like Desmond Haynes and bowl fast like Malcolm Marshall. So Malcolm Marshall, I would say, certainly from a bowling point of view, he would be the one that he was a mentor to me in those young days. I spent a lot of time. He would come and watch under 19 practice and under 19 trials and stuff. And I would always, again, through my own curiosity, I wasn't shy of asking a question. So I would always try and pick his brains. And he has a huge part to play in the bowler that I became later on.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit later on about your selection for Barbados, your first class debut, alongside both of the
Mhm.
people you mentioned, Desi and Malcolm. But did you get a chance as a youngster to go to Kensington Oval in Bridgetown to watch Barbados or to watch the West Indies play?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. My earliest memory of going to Kensington Oval was a game. I'm sort of 13 or 14, I think. There's a game, Barbados versus Jamaica, in what was then the Old Shell Shield competition. So Barbados has got um, Desmond Haynes, Gordon Greenidge, Carlisle Best, who was as good a batsman as those two, even though they obviously have more recognition than him. It's also got Malcolm Marshall, Joel Garner. I think Wayne Daniel was one of the bowlers as well. Telston Payne is playing. It's like a proper, nearly a test team. And we're playing Jamaica, and Jamaica's got Patterson, Michael Holding, Courtney Walsh, and a young bowler called Aaron Daly, who was deadly as well. Jeffrey Dujon is their keeper. And again, it's two uh, unbelievable first class teams going against each other. And my earliest recollection is I'm at school at Ellerslie. That game is on a Thursday, I think it was. Um, so you get on the school bus with all my friends, and we know what we're going to do already before it's happened. You get to school. The game starts at 10 o'clock at Kensington Oval, and Kensington Oval to where we're going to school is it's a walk. Um, so we go into the front door of the school, into the main gate, into our classroom. We sign in on the register to make sure that it's recorded that we're there. Then we out the back over the fence, jump on the first minibus we saw, head off to Kensington Oval. And back then they had a school boy stand. So Kensington Oval, there was a stand for school kids. It was called the school boy stand. And if you turned up at Kensington Oval with your school clothes on, you didn't have to pay to get in the school boy stand. Um, and we're sitting there watching watching these like unbelievable cricketers duel, you know. And that's the first time I saw, like, to me, what like real fast bowling was. Like, you remember Michael Holding pushing off from the south end at Kensington Oval. That's now the Malcolm Marshall end. And you remember, if you remember Michael Holding in the early days, he had these two run-ups. He had a short run, and then he had this long, beautiful run-up. And I can remember him charging in off the nearly off the side screen on the south end at Kensington Oval, and we're sitting there, these young kids, eyes wide like this, watching him bowl, you know. And the ball is so fast, you can see the ball. But what you do notice is that Jeffrey Dujon, who the wicket keeper is, he is the keeper. He's standing on the old practice pitches at the Kensington Oval on the north side, and the practice pitches, for those of people who went to the old Kensington, was on the edge of the boundary. So so Geoffrey Dujon is standing probably 20, 30 yards off the boundary, taking the ball above his head, and the Kensington Oval, again, for first class cricket. It was like a test match. So Barbados versus Jamaica in those days would sell out like a test match.
Yeah, I can remember. I was lucky enough in the summer of the long hot summer here in the UK of 1976, Otis. I can remember being in the crowd. I was at the Vauxhall end at the Oval with my schoolmates.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly longer journey, though, it must be said, than the one you had, but from Cardiff up to London to actually watch the 1976 test. I've just got vivid memories of Michael Holding, as you say, running in. I've got memories of actually being able to hear the chatter by the slip fielders because everyone was standing so far back. And then
Correct.
when the ball thudded into not the middle of the bat, but the middle of the body of some of the English batters, it was wow.
Yeah.
It was gladiatorial, and of course these were days before helmets, and yeah. And I must say, Otis, as a former schoolmaster, I must admire your education, your cricketing education, and I think to actually get a chance to witness in the flesh the top quality players that you just mentioned, that was fantastic. So let's move on in terms of you were like so many other young boys growing up in Bridgetown, watching first class cricket, dreams of making it. What
Mm-hmm.
what what led to you actually making it? And you, as you mentioned, playing for Barbados under 19s. What did you have that others didn't?
Look, there are a lot of people, and I say this all the time. Um, some that were perhaps better than me. Um, my driving force was my upbringing and where I came from, and the fact that for people like me, often there's not a lot of hope, if you like, for development. You know, so I have this natural ability to play cricket, and I decided at a very early age, through the help of obviously my family and stuff like that and friends, cricket was going to be the thing that will make a better life for me and my family, you know. So from a very early age, I had a focus, and that was my focus. So, you know, like I said, I ended up at secondary school. I ended up playing sort of under 15 cricket at 12 years old. Uh, so I always played, because once I had that growth spurt, I ended up being quicker than some of the other guys that were better than me. There were people that would have been ahead of me. Once I had that growth spurt and I put some pace on, I always had aggression anyway, because that aggression was, you know, a product, I guess, of the environment that I grew up in as a child. You know, and therefore, but the curiosity is the thing that helped me to get better. That helped me to seek out knowledge and information, and something that I think I still do now, you know. And then I played for Barbados first, Barbados in the 19s. If you think of the in the 19 tournaments around those times, Brian Lara he's a star already. He's the same age as me. I'm probably a couple of months older than him. He is the star. Jimmy Adams is playing in those tournaments. A fellow called Roland Holder, Sherwin Campbell, Phil Wallace from Barbados. Um, you go around, lots and lots of guys that ended up playing for West Indies, Keith Atherton, people like that, a lot of people. So the under 19 competition, it used to be called the Northern Telecom Youth Cricket. And it would that under 19 tournament would mirror the first class tournament, and it used to be a fantastic. I think they still do it now. It used to be a fantastic tournament for developing players, but also for me from Barbados to see who my nearest rivals or competitors will be to make the West Indies team from other teams.
Yeah, and in the season 1990-1991, you made your debut in the Inter-Island first-class competition, the Red Stripe Cup. Of course, Red Stripe being a well-known brewery or a well-known brand. Yeah. And you made your debut, if I've done my homework right, Otis, forgive me if I've got it wrong, but you made your debut against the Windward Islands, and it was at Kensington Oval. And I believe that your maiden wicket was someone, or if it wasn't your maiden wicket, it would have been your second wicket, but I think it might have been your maiden wicket, was someone who we knew here in the UK playing for Middlesex. So Neil Williams, another very, very decent. My recollection of Neil was that he was a slightly more skiddier bowler than you, and also no mean batter either.
Yeah, that was my first wicket.
Great. I'm glad I've done my homework. Right, that's a big tick. And you were bowling alongside your idol Malcolm Marshall. There was someone else in the attack who we also saw in county cricket called Anderson Cummins, and I believe it was Hendy Springer as well.
Hendy Springer played club cricket down in Lamphey as an off spinner.
That's it.
Down in Pembrokeshire, he played some club. People from that part of the world will know him. Beautiful off spinner.
Yeah. And Desi Haynes was captain. The lineup, you mentioned Roland Holder, Philo Wallace, who I can remember. Well, Philo hit the ball a long, long way, I seem to remember. And Carlisle Best, Gordon Greenwich. Wow, what for you as a young cricketer coming in, to be surrounded by those great names and to share the changing room, to walk on the pitch alongside those players. Your dreams must have come true, Otis.
Yeah, look, they sure did. The year before in the under-19s, I'd had a really good season. And then 89-90, I think it was 89-90, I got the opportunity to go to Australia and play some A-grade cricket for Fremantle. So I spent a winter in Australia playing A-grade cricket for Fremantle, and that was also an amazing experience for a young boy from Barbados. Because at the time, Jeff Marsh was opening batting for Australia and making a lot of runs, and he would come back when he's not playing any cricket and play for the local team, for Fremantle. Sean Marshall, I think, is the oldest of the Marsh brothers, would have been about 3 or 4 running around the dressing room as they did back in the time. And that cricket had, I was playing, I'm a 19, 20 year, I think I turned 21 over there, and I'm playing cricket against the likes of Tom Moody. Young people of my age would have been Damien Martin was a younger up-and-coming top player over there in the league at the time. Justin Langer was in the league at the time, but Terry Alderman was also there. Dennis Lilly was coaching at the WACA, coaching Western Australia, and I used to get the opportunity to go down to the WACA and be a net bowler. So I interacted with Dennis Lilly at that time. And so those experiences, remember, for a boy coming from Spring Head, were like mind-blowing experiences, and my curiosity, and I will keep mentioning that all the time, because for me, that's the thing that keeps you learning all the time, and I keep asking these guys questions, and then I would go to the WACA and watch first-class cricket and test cricket. When Australia played against New Zealand, I think it was, I got the opportunity to go down there and watch and sit there and watch these guys operating and so on, so by the time I came back to Barbados at the end of that season, and then because I'd grown so much, the experience in Australia, I'd had a good season at home in the under-19s, but then the experience at home, the experience in Australia had made me so much better. I was getting stronger. Understood bowling a little bit better. Had a really good in Barbados. You get called to trials, you see. So I went to senior trials, and out of the senior trials, I didn't make the team for the first game, but then I got brought in. I think it was Ezra Mosley, who I think Ezra also played for Glamorgan. I think Ezra got injured, and then I replaced Ezra in the team for that game against the Windward Islands. And I'll never forget. Remember, I'm a young boy from Springhead, so then I make it into the Barbados team, the first person from Springhead to play for Barbados, and that's a big deal. So everybody, well, I think by then we've relocated from Springhead to a place called Cyan Hill, but everybody from Cyan Hill is at Kensington Oval to see me make my debut. It's a nerve-wracking situation. Desmond Hayes come to me in the morning and says, right, you're going to open the bowling. So Malcolm Marshall is opening the bowling at the south end of the ground, and little Ottis Gibson is opening the bowling at the north end of the ground. And it's terrifying, but again, what happened in this game was my first 4 overs in first class cricket. I think there's 4. I only bowled 4. My first spell went 4 overs for like 26, because when I'm playing in the under-19s and I'm quicker than some of the guys that played before, I try to go for the stumps all the time. I go short or I go for the stumps. Now I'm playing men's cricket. I go short and the guy top edge it and it goes for 4. Then when I go full, the guy hit it and it goes down the ground for 4 again. And I've bowled 4 overs for 26, and I'm feeling pretty embarrassed because everybody from St. Hills come to watch me make my debut, and it's not going great. And then lunchtime comes, and Desmond Hayes, as captain, comes to me and says, right, okay, don't worry about that. That can happen to anybody. You're going to start from the south end. After lunch, Malcolm Marshall will be our mid-off. Just listen to Marshall. Do whatever Marshall says, okay? I said, yeah, no problem, no problem. Anyhow, but my mind is attack, and this was my first in-game lesson from Mako. So Mako goes, right, okay, Desi sets the field, there's 2 slips, there's a gully, there's 3 in the ring, there's no short leg, there's a man at fine leg, there's a square leg, there's a mid-on. Basic field. Desi's Malcolm Marshall's there, shining the ball and talking to me, trying to keep me calm, whatever, right, okay. See the keeper? Bowl the ball through to the keeper. Yeah? So I stream in, first after lunch, through to the keeper, this much wide. Batsman leaves alone. Desi's at slip. So he's the ringmaster. Desi's at slip. And he's shouting, well ball, Gibbo, well ball, Gibbo. I'm walking back. I'm 21, a little naive, and I'm thinking, I feel like I'm wasting my energy here because the batsman didn't have to play, I walk back and Mako says, well ball. What are you going to bowl now? Mako asked me, what are you going to bowl now? I said, no, I'm going to bounce in. He says, no, do the same again. Right. So I run in again, through to the keeper. Just leave. Desmond Hayes, elbow, Gibbo, brilliant. And I'm like thinking to myself as I'm walking back, my head is going like this. And I'm like, it feels like it's just a waste of energy bowling that wide, And Marco, the ball comes round to mid-off. Marco shining the ball. What are you going to bowl now? I'm not Yorking. No, do the same again. And I'm like, you sure? He said, yeah, do the same again. Through to the keeper, leaves it. 3 balls, dots. And the crowd is, even the crowd now is thinking I don't know how the crowd got involved because Desi's carrying on from slip, and now the crowd is like, oh, well ball. And then like the 4th ball, it's the same line, and the batsman's trying to play, and he played a miss, and Desi's like this, and the crowd goes like this, and then suddenly it feels like I'm bowling unbelievable when all I'm doing is bowling the ball in the channel. And that was my first lesson. If you want to, in order, the only way you can control the scoring rate is if you can control your length. So try to first of all control your length first. And Marco is teaching me that in game, And that's something that I've never forgotten. And that's, I mean, this exact story as I'm relaying it to you is how I relate to guys that I work with when I'm trying to get them to understand about keeping the game as simple as possible. And that's the simplest way.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely fascinating, Otis. Who was um, who was Barbados's coach at the time? Uh, so uh,
Um, coach, teams having coaches had only just become a real big thing. And I think the coach at the time was, uh, um, it could have been a man called William Bourne.
yeah,
William Bourne. William Bourne was I think
Bill Bourne. Yeah, yeah,
yes,
he played a little bit for Warwickshire in
Warwick,
the
Warwickshire.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and he played Birmingham League. I remember
yeah,
seeing him in the early 70s, mid 70s. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
But
think he was one of the first real like full-time coaches that came in and like career coaches, and try to
yeah,
really develop players. He was the guy.
yeah, it's very nice to hear, and I'm sure everyone on the call as well. Um, Lovely to hear about stories of Malcolm Marshall, but also how nice to hear that senior bowlers would help the junior bowlers, because I know in some aspects of county cricket where the up and
Mhm.
coming aspiring youngster could have been a threat to the more senior bowler. But how great to hear that you had someone like Desi and Mako helping you. Now, I know that the following season, 91-92, you were chosen
Mhm.
for West Indies A
Yeah,
against England A. And I believe you then made an appearance for West Indies Board 11. So
yeah.
what are your memories? What are your memories of that A team?
One of my funniest memories, and it's probably before that one, I think, of an England team coming to the West Indies. I was a netballer at the time, so I would still have been in my teenage years. And we bowled to the West Indies first in the morning, and then when we come back in the afternoon to bowl to England, who would come and practice in the afternoon, and then all the West Indies players and so on would say to us, "Don't make it too comfortable for them, don't." And I can remember, I don't know who was. Okay, there's either Mickey Stewart or Keith Fletcher was the coach at the time of this tour, because I have a really good memory of this tour. Um, and we were bowling to the likes of David Gower and all these guys there as youngsters, and we were bowling lots of short balls. And he called us in, and the coach called us in, all of us, and he said, "Look, we just want to get some practice. Can you pitch it up and let the guys have some hits?" But every time you pitch it up, of course, you're not good at controlling length when you're a teenager, and they would play some really nice shots, and then you would go back to the short pitch bowling. And then he called us in again, and he said, "Look, I'm sure they're going to get enough of this when the test match starts tomorrow. So just pitch it up if you can, and let them have a decent net."
Mm, mm.
uh, you know, so that was the early thing. Yeah, so like I said, my early years in cricket was absolutely fantastic. Playing against England, I played against Robert Croft, and when Crofty and so the year before I came to Glamorgan, or the same year, I think this was 90. Was this 94?
Yeah, yeah,
This was 94. I played for Barbados against England at Kensington Oval. So I played against Robert Croft. I think Matthew Maynard was on that tour,
yeah.
and
He
maybe
was.
Hugh Morris as well. I was Hugh Morris the one before that.
Yeah, yeah. And you also furthered your cricketing education. You've mentioned being in Australia, and who
Mhm.
finer a coach than Dennis Liddy, but you also furthered your education with a spell for border in South Africa. And I think you took
Yeah, yeah.
30, I've got in my notes here, 33 wickets at just 24 runs apiece. So
Mhm.
just tell us how that opportunity with border arose.
So I was playing league cricket in when I first came over, to before I came to even to Glamorgan, I was playing cricket in the Lancashire in the Bolton League for a club called Farnworth. And I came across a guy called Peter Stridham, who went on to he played a few games for South Africa. And we played against each other, and we actually hit it off quite nicely, and we spent time together during the week and so on. And he was at Border, and he said, "Look, Border is looking for a overseas cricketer. Would you fancy it?" Um, in those early days, I was all about going for experiences, you know. So the opportunity came up, and I didn't have an agent then, so obviously I did it myself, and I'm speaking to whoever I needed to speak to, and they said, "We'll offer you this." And I've got no idea of how much is a lot, but when you've got nothing, you take whatever. So I just said, yeah, I'll come and play for sure. And I went to Border, and I absolutely loved it. I ended up having, I think, 3 seasons at Border, 2 seasons at Greek and West, and 1 season at the Lions. I ended up having 6 seasons of first class cricket in South Africa after that, you know. But that first experience was fantastic. I played, you know, Peter Kirsten was captain of our team. Rod McCurdy from Australia, former Australia fast bowler, was playing in our team. We had a good team. We had a decent team, but we were playing against some very good teams over there. Alan Lamb was playing for Western Province. Alan Donald, all the guys that were. This is around '92, so all the guys that ended up being those first guys to represent South Africa when they came back in after readmission in '92. All those guys were playing in the first class tournament, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, a great learning curve. And as you mentioned, 1994, your cricketing career brought you to Glamorgan. You made your
Uh-huh.
debut, Oxford University in the Parks, a very, very different, very traditional ground, no advertising boards,
Hmm.
a bunch of
Yeah.
undergraduates and postgraduates. You then made your championship debut, I seem to remember, against Northamptonshire. But before we talk about your performances and playing alongside some legends of Glamorgan cricket, who actually recommended you to Glamorgan? Who was instrumental in you
Yeah,
putting on the daffodil sweater?
I seem to remember Alan Jones, who I met Alan Jones in September actually when Yorkshire played Glamorgan
Yeah,
at in the now what's it called, the Swillock Stadium? Is that
Sapphire
what it's called, or
Gardens.
the
No, no,
Sophia Gardens?
yeah,
So I met him at Sophia Gardens just recently, and it was fantastic to see him. So Alan Jones and Hugh Morris, who was the captain at the time, had came to the Caribbean on a scouting mission. Um, and I had come across Hugh Morris before. I think Hugh Morris had come out to the Barbados before with the Fred Ramsey Pro-Am.
yeah,
Fred Ramsey used to bring a Pro-Am team out to the Caribbean at the end of the season. It used to be an end of the season thing for them. And I think I had come across Hugh Morris then. And I think I might have even played against him in an 18 game or something like that.
yeah,
Um, so they came on a scouting mission and they watched us play. Um, I bowled quite well in Jamaica. I seem to remember they were there in Jamaica. I bowled quite well, but I made some runs as well. And they had their eyes on a few people. And I can remember going up to them and saying, "Listen, you can stop your search now. I'm your man. You know, if you bring me there, I won't let you down. I'll take wickets and get runs for you and whatever." Um, and then by the time they were leaving, so we played a game in Jamaica, and then we came back to Barbados for another game. And then when we came back to Barbados, they came and spoke to me and said, "Well, you know, we'd like you to come." So I was like, "Yeah, fantastic." And that's how it happened.
yeah. And I know that you repaid their faith, 60 first-class wickets that summer, three
Mhm.
fifers. And what were your memories of your earliest days in county cricket? Obviously, as you said, you played in the Bolton League, um, but what were your earliest memories of actually playing 7 days a week in county cricket?
Well, I was going to say the relentless nature of it, but you know, I'm involved in county cricket now, and it's still relentless. You
Yeah,
know, you've not much time for rest. Back then, when I was a young man, so it didn't really affect me that much. I wanted to play and I wanted to learn. Playing for Glamorgan, the one thing that struck me was always the fans, how sort of passionate the fans were for the Daffodil and wanting the team to do well. I seem to remember uh, a couple of times when I was doing okay and they're singing that I was a Welshman. I hope they haven't taken that status away from me. I remember them singing that quite a few times, which if the fans are enjoying what you're doing, it means that you're obviously doing something, you're doing okay. I think my first year I got 60 wickets, and probably I think I might have got about 700 runs. I got a lot of runs that year. I can remember because I started off batting at number 9 or 10 because nobody really knew that much about my batting. And then I got some runs and I ended up. I think I moved up. I ended up 7 or 8. I think maybe number 8. Robert Croft was ahead of me, and I ended up about number 8. But I think I made some good contributions with the bat as well.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
we'll we'll talk about 1996 and your place in the batting records in a second, but let's just dwell on Glamorgan 1994. It's the year after the golden summer of 1993, where Glamorgan
mhm,
had lifted the Sunday League title, a never to be
mhm.
forgotten game at Canterbury. Viv Richards's last game of professional cricket. Those were big shoes to fill, and I know Hugh was as captain was very keen that Glamorgan had a fast bowler, something that we hadn't had. We had an outstanding seam bowler in Steve Watkin. Steve
Yep.
Barwick had alternated to off cutters, having started life as a seamer. And you had Adrian Dale, there was Darren Foster, various others in the mix. But what was it like bowling with Steve Watkin, an absolute Glamorgan legend at the other end, someone who could almost make the ball talk?
No, no, it was good. Again, learning from him. He was deadly accurate. He wasn't, quick, but he was quick enough, and he made the ball do. Always made the ball do something. So again, bowling at so high gardens, and I noticed last month in our game that nothing's changed with regards to how placid the pitches are. There's nothing there for the fast bowlers still. So you had to be skillful, and what he was definitely very skillful. So it was nice to be able to learn from him about seam position and making the ball nip around and stuff like that. Robert Croft was good because he bowled a lot of overs, and gave the spinners opportunity to rest. He bowled a hell of a lot of overs, and he was an outstanding bowler. I thought Robert Croft was a fantastic off spinner. Very good. But in those early days, I think, and I think probably what he might agree with me, bowling away from home was a lot more enjoyable than bowling at home. When you went away from home, you got a lot more assistance from the pitches. Um, I enjoyed. I I didn't enjoy the traveling up and down the country. I think we used to still play. I think we used to still play 3 days, then play a Sunday league game, and then go back and finish the 4-day game. I think that was still the format at the time. So there was a lot of traveling, a lot of sleeping in car. I don't like sleeping in cars, but there was a lot of not enough whilst somebody else drove you to a cricket ground somewhere. I seem to recall.
Yeah, I can remember being on the treadmill with you, Otis, as well, and with my good friends Edward Bevan and the late great Don Shepherd. But let's
Yeah,
not forget that in the Glamorgan side as well, unfortunately, injury then struck. But Roland Lefebvre was there
yeah.
as well. And if Otis was a Welshman, well, Rowley was a Welshman as well.
He was.
And
He absolutely was. Yeah,
and Rowley was one of the linchpins behind Glamorgan's one-day success as well. So
yeah.
I don't know, and we mustn't forget as well that Adrian Dale, a genuine all-rounder,
Yeah.
Who was worth his place both with bat and ball, and then a batting lineup. Wow, you had
We had Steve James and Hugh Morris, is it? Steve
yep,
James, Hugh Morris,
yep,
Matthew, Tony
yep,
Cotty,
yep,
uh, Adrian Dale,
yep, and
uh, Colin Metson was the keeper.
Colin Metson was the keeper. Let's just talk about
Colin,
Matthew May. Yeah, let's just talk about Matthew
yeah,
Maynard because how in we mentioned earlier some destructive batters in the West Indies. I
yeah,
mentioned Phil Wallace who could hit it a long way. You mentioned Carlisle Best,
yeah,
who I briefly saw as well. But Matthew Maynard, on his day, in his pomp, having matured like a very
yeah,
good red wine, the influence of Viv
yeah,
Richards, everything has been well
yeah.
chronicled about that. But you must have seen some amazing, remarkable innings by Matthew.
Yes, for sure. And he was the most um, Caribbean like batsman, English batsman that I came across. The shots that he would play, he was fearless. You know, quite often in the Caribbean, when you listen to the fast bowlers talk, we're not stupid. A lot of people think that we're stupid fast bowlers, but you know when if you if a guy can play the short ball, then you will tend not to bowl a short ball to him, and that's what Matthew had um, up his sleeve. Matthew was very good on the short balls. So you would always hear the likes of Ambrose and Walsh and those guys would be like, "Nah, don't waste your time bowling short to Maynard because he can take it on. But if he's not taking it on, he can also get out the way of it, and it didn't have an effect on him like it would have on somebody perhaps like a Graham Hick, who was equally as destructive but susceptible to the short ball.
Yeah, I think the phrase "flat track bully" described Graham Hick, although a wonderful player, wonderful record. Of course, now coaching in Australia and doing a lot of good work.
No,
Your
but I think he was better than a flat track, but you don't get a hundred
yeah,
hundreds if you play on only on flat tracks. But he, you know,
I agree.
unfor unfortunately for him, you know, uh, um, his helmet came with a flashing light on, and that's where most of the fast bowlers bowl, you know, and he wasn't able to overcome that enough. But his test record doesn't reflect his ability, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree entirely. I can remember Glamorgan used to play. I mean, you've mentioned Swansea. Glamorgan used to play at Abergavenny, and I can remember Worcester. It was virtually a home game for Worcester as well, and some innings uh, that Graham Hick played.
Mm.
Tim Curtis, Phil Neal, some other outstanding county cricketers, and boy oh boy,
Yeah.
absolutely right about Graham Hick up there amongst the best.
Oh yeah.
Your success with Glamorgan in 1994, your success in the Caribbean, your success in South Africa, led to your selection then in 1995 for the West Indies
Yes.
tour of England. And
Hmm.
the lineup by then, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Ian Bishop, Kenny Benjamin, and
Yeah.
yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and
Winston was also on that team, in that squad.
yeah,
Um, yeah. But that was, you know, my first call up to the West Indies again. Remember where he started. Remember where I'm coming from. You know, from a tenement in Spring Head. So now I'm down in the maroon of West Indies. You know, this is a rapid rise, and this is unbelievable. But it's what I've been working towards my whole life. You know, so to get that opportunity was absolutely amazing.
and to walk out to make your one-day international debut at Lords, and
Yeah.
then a few weeks later to make your Test match debut at Lords as well. It doesn't get much better than that, OT, does it?
No, and you know, I tell people now. I think, and I don't know how I would even go about investigating it. And I feel like I must be one of the few people outside of an English person to make his Test match debut and one day international debut at Lords. You
Yeah,
know, but I don't know how I would even go about trying to that out. But yeah, that was my one day international debut was interesting because it was we played 3 games. I think the series was 1-1, and the last game was going to be at Lords. Courtney Walsh had got injured. We played on the Friday and then traveled on the Saturday. We played on the Sunday at Lords. Courtney Walsh had got injured. I think the second game was at Headingley, and Courtney Walsh had got injured there. So now it's a decider. Um, and Andy Roberts was the coach at the time, and Andy said, "Look, if Walsh isn't fit, you're going to play. You're going to make your debut." And I'm like, "Wow, this is unbelievable! To make my debut at Lords." Um, and then whilst we're warming up for the game, Walsh is doing everything. He's bowling uh, and stuff like that. And I just assumed that he would be fit for the match because I've heard nothing. Nobody's come to me on the morning and said, "Listen, you're going to play today, right?" So now we're sitting in the dressing room. Richie Richardson's won the toss, I think, and we decided we're bowling. And we're sitting there, and the guys are getting changed, and I'm just sitting there with my tracksuit on, feeling a little bit disappointed. Then Andy Roberts said, "Why are you not getting changed?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't. Nobody said anything to me." And he said, "You're playing, man. This is literally the bell is going to ring in 10 minutes." And that's how I found out I was going to make my one day international debut. And I went. I think I got 3 for, I don't 50 something, because there were 55 over games then. It was the old Cornhill insurance games. It was still in white clothes in 1995. They were still in white clothes, and there
Yeah,
were 55 over games. And I think I got 3 wickets. I got 3 for 55, I think.
yeah, and
I got Addison.
you got
Addison made
Graham.
100. I remember that.
Yeah, Graham Thorpe, Mike Atherton, and Alan Wells.
Alan
Um,
Wells. Yeah. Alan Wells.
yeah,
Mike Addison made 100 against us. I remember that.
yeah, but not a bad haul. And then, as I say, a few weeks later to make your Test debut at Lords, and
Yeah.
in the first innings, Alex Stewart and Darren Goff.
And Darren Goff, yeah. I'd
Yeah,
actually bowled quite well in my first spell, and it was my first spell, and it was almost like similar to my first spell in Test cricket. Was almost similar to my first spell in first class cricket. The difference being this time that I'm so confident in myself, and I'm trying to tell Richie what feel I want. I don't want a mid on. I want another slip because I know that I've got my outswinger locked in. I've played county cricket at Lords, so I understand Lords and everything else. And no, this is the field. Keep the field. And they would edit through slip, and then when I got too full, they would hit me for 4 and whatever, and I was getting a bit frustrated. And then I got Alex Stewart out, caught point with the worst ball I bowled in that spell. I got a wicket caught point. I got Alex Stewart caught at point. I remember that. I caught Keith Atherton at point. Terrible ball.
how I know quite a few people, and I know walking out there a few years ago, myself, it was a little bit disconcerting. The slope. Um,
Yeah,
when you first played there in county cricket, how did you find it?
I was lucky because, and again, it goes back to your education and in the game and your experiences. Remember, I played for Glamorgan then. Um, Desmond Haynes and Mike Roseberry are opening the batting for Glamorgan, and Desmond Haynes. I went out for dinner with Desmond the night before the game, and we were talking about Lords and all this sort of stuff. And this is yeah. And so we're talking about all these things and whatever. And he says, "Be careful with the slope," and
Mm,
but again, Steve Watkin, or who would have a lot of experience, he also tried to help me to understand what the does to the ball, and not so much to the ball, but what it does to your run up, especially when you jump, it can throw you off um, from the far side, from the nursery, and it sort of throws you down the slope. Um, and therefore you got to really, even if you angle your run up a little bit to make sure that you're working with the slope and not against the slope and stuff like that. So those are things that I had to learn. But I was full of confidence then in that period.
we mustn't forget that the 1995 West Indies tour of England also was notable from a batting point of view, Oti. because you registered your maiden first class 100 on the
Yeah,
tour against, I think, if I'm right in saying it was at Taunton against Somerset.
Somerset, yeah,
What are
Somerset,
your
yeah.
memories of that?
I'll tell you what one of my memories of that whole tour was that whole tour. I think was we played 6 test matches, and there were 13 county matches, if you remember. And
Mm,
you remember back then, we used to play a test match. There'd always be like some sort of a
I
county
know.
game in the middle. And nowadays, you look at the test tours. Test tours don't even have a a warm up match, and we played 13 of those games.
Yeah,
Uh, and then by the end, the Somerset game, we played Somerset the first game of that tour. And then there was a situation where if this team is in the cup, you were going to play against that team. So Somerset was out of the cup, and we ended up going back to Somerset to play the second time round. And what I can remember clearly from that game was a man called Andre Van Troos.
a Dutchman,
Remember,
a fast.
remember him?
I
A
do. I
tall,
remember him. I
a
remember him
tall,
actually. Yeah,
gangly,
yeah,
um, clumsy looking, but very, very fast bowler called Andre Van Troos.
yeah,
And in that game, Andre Van Troos hit Jimmy Adams. Jimmy was tired because Jimmy was playing in some of the test matches, but Jimmy, like I did, played all of the county games as well. And we got down to Somerset, and this is sort of near the back end of August or something. I think it was middle to the back end of August. And Jimmy was saying to the management that he was tired and he didn't want to play. But of course, the stars in the test team would be rested, and then the rest of us would have to make up the numbers to play. And so Jimmy ended up playing. And I can remember Jimmy hitting um, Andre Van Troop hitting Jimmy in the face. I remember Jimmy used to wear these very flimsy looking side pieces. There were no grill. He didn't wear a grill. He just wore the side pieces. So
yeah.
his face was a mess. He ended up having an operation up in Nottingham, I think, to reconstruct his face. He smashed his cheekbone. So the cheekbone on the side that got hit was smashed, and the one on the other side was fractured as well. So he ended up having some plates put in his face and so on. I can remember going out in the evening to bat. There was some sawdust on where the blood was and everything, and I was like, "Phew, this is." And Van Troos is still charging it, and I was like, "Oh boy, this isn't good." I survived the night, and Rice Hall was the manager at the time, and Rice Hall insisted that we all, rather than going back to the hotel on the bus, we were going to go to the hospital because he was sitting in the hospital in Taunton at the time, and he said we will go to Taunton to see him. So we went to see him on the bus, and we got off, and he couldn't all go in together, so we were going in like threes and fours or whatever. And all Jimmy was concerned about what's the state of the game. Try not to lose the match, And I was like, all right, man, I'm do something for you tomorrow, I said to him. And then the next day we came back, and we were behind the 8 ball. I think Shiv got 100, um, and I got 100 off about 69 balls, and it was pure like survival. But my instincts from my early childhood growing up kicked in, and he was bowling seriously quick. Um, and I kept taking on the short ball. I hit a few good ones and so on, but I played a few shots and I got 100 quite quickly off 69 balls. And then I think in the second innings, myself and Vasper Drakes bowled him out. It was a low scoring game, and I think myself and
Mm,
Vasper Drakes bowled him
mm.
out, and we ended up winning that game. And that was my first class 100. But I clearly remember Andre Van Troos because that guy was seriously quick.
Yeah. And you very nearly, the following year, 1996, you've come back to Glamorgan. You
Yeah,
very, very nearly scored 100, a county championship 100 for Glamorgan. Now, it came in a game at Swansea, not
yeah.
not the fastest of pitches, it must be said, against Leicestershire. And at the other end with you was Tony Cottee. Let's not forget Tony Cottee was the man who in 1993 had hit the winning runs in the Sunday League.
Yeah,
the Tony Cottee, uh, former professional footballer with Swansea City.
yeah,
Swansea was his home, where he, in fact, there's a lovely story that he'd been spotted as a blonde, curly-haired boy aged about 8 or 9 by Wilf Wooler in the nets or practicing on the outfield
yeah,
during a game. But here on Tony's home patch, I know Tony went on to get a sizable score, but
yeah.
so Cottee and Gibson adding no less than 211 runs for the 7th wicket against Leicestershire, a record that's stood until quite recent times. What what are your memories of that? And I'm not divulging how many you were out for. I'll leave you to tell everyone.
Uh, Um, I actually couldn't remember this one, but now you're talking about it, I can remember it because I think Phil Simmons was playing for Leicester. Was Phil
That's
Simmons
right.
playing?
He
Phil
was, yeah,
Simmons, Phil Simmons.
he was.
Phil Simmons was playing for Leicester, and I remember that one. But I think Cots and I put on another good score also against Somerset. I think I got 90s that year. I got a 90 against Somerset, where Van Troos was also playing in this
Yeah,
game in 96. I remember that one more than this one because in that one, I've come in and I've scored quickly again. Um, and I was itching to 100. I think pass cuts uh, on the score, and I was itching towards 100, and then Cots comes down the wicket and said, "Look, get him on strike so he can get his 100 before the next new ball, which was just around the corner." And stupidly, I tried to get him on strike, and I got run out. I think I can remember that one.
mm,
The Leicester one, we must have been in trouble. That those have always been. If the team is in trouble, that's when I would try and stand up and probably better when things were going easy for us. I would try to be a little bit too aggressive and quite often give my wicket away. I think I probably should have made more runs in my career, but I had a little bit more batting ability than perhaps the runs that I've scored reflects.
yeah. Well, on that day against Leicestershire at Swansea, Otis, you made a fine 97. I think 100 was richly deserved, but in the scorebook, which of course I must pay great attention to, it was 97. In terms of your bowling performances, though, in 1996, I think it's fair to say the wear and tear. You'd been touring with the West Indies, and you had
Yeah,
during your second year with Glamorgan, you had a few little niggling injuries that you
no,
picked up.
no, I had one injury. I'd gone to the World Cup in '96.
Yeah,
Um, I went to the World Cup in '96, and I actually played in the semi-final, Australia West Indies in Mohali, and I probably should not have played that game because the injury was there already, and they knew about the injury, and we thought that I could get through it, but the injury was worse than we first thought. So I went back to the Caribbean after that World Cup, and I tried to do everything to get fit. And I said, look, I want to try and come over early, and I came over early to try and see if I can get fit because there were some games I played in the early part of the season where I didn't even bowl. There was a game against Warwickshire, I think, where I didn't bowl. I played mostly as a batsman. They had Sean Pollock,
mm.
um, and uh, physio at the time was
Dean Conway.
uh, Dean Conway was the physio, and Dean is like,
Yeah,
"Oti, I can't find anything wrong with you, but I had this adductor team, and he said, I can't find anything wrong with you," and so on and so on. Um, and then he took me to Harley Street to see a man called Jerry Gilmore, and it turned out that I had this what they call a Gilmore's groin. It's now called a sportsman's hernia, but I
yeah,
had this Gilmore's groin thing in that '96 season. And I ended up having surgery in Harley Street and missing a large part of the season. And that sort of changed everything with my time in Glamorgan. But it wasn't like a lot of injuries. It was one injury that we couldn't get to the bottom of, and by the time we got to the bottom of it, half the season had gone already.
yeah, yeah. And then a winter in South Africa, Griqualand
Mm.
West, and
Yeah,
whilst you were there, the West Indies were touring,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I I believe you were in the right place at the right time because there were injuries in the West Indies camp, and you got a recall to the West Indies team. I think it was the fourth test at Cape Town, if I'm right.
Yeah, yeah. Right place at the right time, or perhaps not. Because you see, at that time, what happened in South Africa, they used to have a shutdown for Christmas. So I hadn't played cricket for a couple of weeks because of the Christmas shutdown. West Indies played Boxing Day in Durban, and I had driven from um, Kimberley to Durban to go and watch them. I spent that whole game with them, and they lost that game. Clive Lloyd was the manager at the time. They lost that game. Malcolm Marshall was the coach. Brian Lara was the captain, and I drove back to Kimberley. And then when I get back to Kimberley, I got a call saying, "Listen, we've got these injuries." Um, Franklin Rose had got himself injured in that Durban Test match, and is saying, "Is there any chance that you could come to Cape Town and we'll assess you and see where we are and see if you'll play?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, Chris." But I said, "Look, you have to understand that I haven't played cricket now for at least 3 weeks. You know, no, no, no problem. We'll assess you." And I flew into Cape Town the day before. I think maybe it was the day before the game, or I had one day's practice. And then they put me in the team, and I don't think I did myself justice. Obviously, I was grateful for that opportunity. And I said to them, and they said to me that I would get, because there was still another test match left in Johannesburg, and then they said I would play this test match in Cape Town, and then the last test match in Johannesburg. And then what happened was that they flew Rayon King from the Caribbean, from Guyana, all the way to Johannesburg, and did exactly to him what they did to me. So he flew in and he got in one day before the test match, I think it was, or 2 days before the test match, and they put him in the test match ahead of me. Which, in by the time that Joburg test match came around, I would have been ready. But the call never came for the second game. So my test career reads 2 matches, not many wickets, not many runs, but again, the little boy from Spring Head, um, to make it as far as wearing the maroon, he's very, very grateful.
Yeah, and the little boy from Spring Head adding to his tally the wicket of Jacques Kallis in Test cricket.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
before we carry on looking at your career, would you say Jacques Kallis was one of the finest batters that you ever had to bowl to? I have got a question for the end from Duncan Evans, who can't
Mhm,
join us this evening, but
mhm.
he's done his homework, and he'd like me to ask you whether Jacques was up there as one of the finest batters you'd ever bowled to.
Um, yeah, he's definitely up there. His record says that. His concentration says that. Um, so I've got Brian Charles Lara as the best that I've ever bowled to. Um, Tenduka. And I call this name, and people always says like, why? I've got Darren Lehman
Yeah,
in that group as well. Darren Lehman was that Lara and those guys was the best. Darren Lehman was probably the hardest
yeah,
guy to get out. So Jack was definitely in there. Jack is a fantastic, and not just a batsman. Jack could have made the team as a batsman or a bowler.
yeah,
When you're looking around for your ideal all rounder, you're looking at Sobers, and then you're looking at Callis.
yeah. You had a spell then with Gauteng in
Yeah,
South Africa, but you also then
yeah.
had a spell playing what was known then as minor county, of course, and we now refer to it as national county, but you had a brief spell playing for Staffordshire. I think again another question that's come in from Peter. Just curious as to what the difference is in standards and approach. Two important things: differences in standards and the differences in approach. Playing much shorter minor county championship matches compared with the first class. So based on your experience with Staffordshire, how would you what would you say to Peter's question there?
I think the Staffordshire thing. I after the Glamorgan finish in '96, I moved back um, to Bolton in Lancashire, where my wife was from. So I moved back to Bolton,
Yeah,
and then I ended up playing. I ended up playing league cricket on the weekend for a team called Leek in the
yeah,
North Staff South Cheshire League. Fantastic club, great people. I ended up playing for them, and then staffs, uh, asked if I would be interested in. I only played um, in their knockout tournament. I didn't play any 3-day cricket or anything, so I
right.
played in their knockout tournaments for them, and that was just to give them a help. Minor counties is very different, but again, if you look at quite often nowadays, perhaps it gets overlooked, but a lot of very good cricketers come out of the
Yeah,
minor counties. And but if you get them at the right time, they've got a lot of experience. They've played a lot of minor counties cricket, and therefore making the step up from minor counties to first class cricket is sometimes easier than somebody who's come all the way through your pathway. You don't want to stop people coming through your pathway. Of course, you still want to have that development pathway. But the thing that the pathway guys don't get is the minor counties experience. So one of the things that we look at now is doing exactly that with some of our pathway guys at Yorkshire, is putting them in the minor county sort of, if there's opportunity, put them in the minor county environment to get some experience.
yeah. I would say exactly the same, Otis, with some of the Welsh youngsters. Obviously, we've seen the emergence of Tom Bevan. We've seen Will Smale coming on
Mm,
to Glamorgan's books, and Alex Horton as well as a wicketkeeper, all benefiting at the right age uh, of playing in a very hard, a very tough environment. Um,
yeah.
your career in September 2001, your
Mhm,
career then takes a slightly different turn because you're
mhm,
appointed as national coach, or certainly by the ECB, one of the lead coaches in Northwest England. Now you've
yeah.
said you've met your wife, you're living in Bolton. Um,
Mhm.
what what led you to take up the offer of coaching for the ECB back in
So
2001?
look, um, by that time, what am I now? 30, 31, I think.
Yeah,
Um, I've done, I did a level 3 course. I've always, again, my curiosity is the thing that you will get out of this whole discussion. I've always been curious, so I started to think about what am I going to do after cricket. Okay, I think I'm going to get into coaching. So, in the April of that year, I went and I did my coaching badges. I went to Lilleshall and did my level 3 and my advanced and stuff like that. And I met some fantastic guys there that were running those courses. John Abrahams, Tim Boone, Paul Farbrace was involved in that setup. A man called Gordon Lord, Hugh Morris was in charge
yeah,
of the
yeah,
ECB at the time, so
yeah.
he was the big boss. And I met those guys, and I really enjoyed that experience of doing that course. And I said to them, the other thing that was going on at the time was, my wife and we were trying desperately to have a family. Um, and that wasn't going according to plan. I had a contract in South Africa. I was still playing cricket, first class cricket in South Africa, and I said, I need to be at home more if this situation is going to work and we're going to have our family, you know. So I made the decision, not necessarily to retire from cricket, but to give cricket a break for that time. And then I was lucky enough that I got the opportunity to be a national coach, and there was a national coach job coming up. And because I'd shown an interest in it when I was doing my level 3, I got a call saying, look, this job is being going to be advertised. You should put in for it and see what happens, you know. And I put in for it. I can remember having to go to Lords. I'm sure it was Lords for an interview. It was that's the first time. This is my first job other than being a fast bowler or a cricketer. So having to put together a presentation, go and do an interview and all that was alien to me, and it was fascinating. So I did that, and I believe there was something ridiculous like 70 something applicants, and it got narrowed down and whatever. And then in the September, I got a call to say that I've got that job, you know, and that was massive for me. I was starting then to really get my teeth into coaching at, you know, so that opportunity came at the right time for me. So I stopped playing that was 2001. Yeah, I stopped playing then. And I went and I threw myself into coaching. I did my level 3, I did my level 4. I was working with some of the best young talents in England at the time, you know, with some of the best young coaches as well. And it was an amazing eye-opening experience for me.
And after 3 years of coaching, you then returned to county cricket, initially with Leicestershire, a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
at Grace Road, and then 2 more seasons with Durham.
With
What are,
Durham, yeah.
First of all, let's talk about Leicestershire. What are your abiding memories of
Yeah.
playing
Well,
playing at Grace Road?
so we get to I think it's the end of the 2003 year, I think, and Hugh Morris comes to me and he says, look, the ECB is restructuring. The contract you have now won't be renewed after April next year. So it was nice of him to give me a heads up in terms of time. And I was on the level 4 course at the time. I can remember. So Tom Moody's coaching at Worcester. Um, John Bristwell is coaching at Worcestershire. All the top head coaches in the county coaches was on this particular module of the level 4 program. And I decided, because I've always sort of looked after myself and kept myself in reasonable shape, I decided I'm going to make a comeback into cricket. So one night we're all in the bar and I got a glass and I go, ting, ting, lads, I got an announcement to make. I'm making a comeback. I'm only 34. I've had 3 years off. My body's in good condition. And I reckon I've got 3 or 4 good years in me still as a county cricketer. And I can remember clearly saying in the room at the time, and all these guys are laughing, and I can remember clearly saying to them in the room, and I'm guaranteeing you now I'll get 50 wickets in county cricket, you know. And they're all laughing, and I'm like, guys, I'm serious. Leicester was the only one that well, Durham showed an interest because Martin Moxon was at Durham. So he came to me on the quiet and he said, listen, are you serious about this? And I said, yeah, I'm serious. But I think his board at the time said 34 is too old for somebody like that. Obviously, I'd been married in England for a long time, so I would have been playing not as an overseas player. I'd have been playing as a local on a British passport. I've been a British passport holder for the best part of 20 odd years. So he said, look, I think they said, it'd be too old at 34, So Leicester came and I went to Leicester and I met with Jimmy Whittaker, and the chairman at the time. I can't remember his name now. The chairman at the time, he was from a company called Arla Foods.
Davidson.
Neil Davidson, yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
I met with them. I met with them too, and I said, look, I'm guaranteeing you that I know that I will get 50 wickets in county cricket, and so on. What I did say to them was, I have an opportunity. It's a unique opportunity because now I'm doing my level 3. I've done my level 4. If I'm being very honest, I want to be a coach. I want to in by the time I get to this time, 40 years old. I'm 34 at the time. By the time I get to 40, I want to be in a position to do this, and this as a coach, you know. But if I have to go back to playing in order to get there, then I'm also prepared to do that. So they signed me, if you remember, I think they signed me as a player coach rather than just a player. And I ended up coaching in their academy for for a bit. In the winters, I did some academy stuff and so on, but in the summers, I played. And again, in that first season, I think I got the Player of the Year in the first season. I came back. I got 60
Mm.
wickets in county cricket, and we
And
won. We also won. We also won the T20 Blast that year, I think as well, in 2004.
yeah, and that was the year when Glamorgan got through to finals day and lost to the Leicestershire Foxes, as uh, you were known as then.
Yeah,
How you mentioned
is
T20,
that right?
obviously. Yeah, T in um in the last 20 years, the way the T20 cricket has uh
Hmm.
exploded. Your
Yeah,
career, you've played Test cricket, you've played one day internationals, you've you've played short format T20. You've seen it all over the world. We've
hmm,
I again, I've got a question for the very end from Howell, who would love to know what your thoughts are about the 100. Let's group that together with the 100, together with T20, not the traditional two innings multi-day that you grew up with in
yeah.
Barbados. Very different, obviously, to the one day internationals, as you said earlier on, 55 over games. But T20 and the 100, the modern format, what are your thoughts?
Mhm. Um, T20, yes. I think I stopped playing in 2007, and then the IPL started maybe in 2008, I think. Um, and I think if T20 was around, even then at the back end of my career, like you look at the likes of Chris Galen, unbelievable, and a lot of these guys are going playing T20 into their early 40s and late 30s and whatever. Had T20 come around just before I finished, I'd have probably carried on a few more years just playing that format. Um, I am not a fan of the 100. I have to say that. You know, I don't see the value in playing a format that nobody else in the world plays. I'm sure. Is it going to take off around the world? I don't know. But at the moment, nobody in the world plays it. And as a county coach myself, what I do see is that the 100 takes up the main part of the English summer. The best, playing conditions in terms of weather is in August, and the 100 takes that away from young batsmen that have to go and try and bat in first class cricket in April and May when the ball is doing all sorts, or in late September when the pitches are tired. The 100 takes up that part of the thing, and so therefore for that reason, for those reasons, I'm not a huge fan of the 100, and that's just my feeling on it.
Yeah, I have to say, working in the community department here at Glamorgan Cricket, I look at it from another point of view in terms of bringing in a new audience, uh, bringing in and attracting young uh, players, young supporters in the same way I got hooked on cricket in the late 1960s, early 1970s, watching the Sunday League on television. Let's let's just dwell, Otis, though, on your and wow, what a magnificent final 2 years in county cricket with Durham, helping to put Durham well and truly on the cricketing map. And you couldn't have had uh, well, script writers couldn't have, I don't think, couldn't have written your final season in 2007. 80
Yeah.
wickets and in that season, you became the first player since, I believe, Middlesex's Richard Johnson, way back in 1994, to take all 10 wickets in an innings. I believe it was something like 10 for 47 against Hampshire. Um,
Mhm.
just, just, just remind us where, 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 where did that game, the 10 for 47? Where was that?
That was at that was here at Chesterley Street against Hampshire.
Yeah.
Um, so I think sometimes when, and this is something that I've reflected on, you know, at the start of that season, um, I had a feeling that that was going to be my last. Um, and so you're 34. When you're young and you're trying to make a team, or even if you're trying to impress somebody or whatever, but definitely trying to make a team as a young cricketer, you're playing all the time, and you can feel the eyes of either selectors or people like that on you. There are people judging you all the time. You know, I got to 30. I was 38 at the time. And I was at peace with myself as a cricketer, and I told myself I think that this might be my last, so I'm just going to give it a good go. You know, I'm going to go out on a high, whatever that looked like. Um, the other thing that we did in that year as well was we won the one day competition at Lords. I was the man of the match in the Lords final of the, was it the NatWest Trophy? I think it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Also against Hampshire. Um, and that year I was just having a ball playing cricket. I wasn't worrying about if I got none for 100 or or six for whatever. I wasn't concerned with anything like that. I was just going out every day. Dale Benkenstein was the captain, perhaps the best captain I've ever played with. You know, and he's just like, right, Gibbo, what do we need right now? And he gave me so much respect and responsibility. You know, I need you. What do you think? And I was like, okay, give me the ball from this end and find somebody from that end, and we'll make it work. We'll figure it out, you know, as we go along or whatever. And I just kept taking wickets. Um, in that 10 for 47 game, I got lucky in a way because we bowled first. I got a couple of wickets. Then there was a rain break, so we went off for a little bit for rain. Then when we came back on, he said, "Well, just carry on from that end." And every time we stopped and we came back and I carried on, I'd get a couple of wickets quite quickly. So then he said, "Right, keep going, keep going, keep going." Then it was lunch. Um, so by lunch, I've got all the wickets that have fallen, and he goes, "Nah, just start after lunch, see how you go." Um, and I'm like, "No, but Liam Plunkett, who was in and around the England setup at the time, if you look at the scorecard from that game, it's remarkable. Liam Plunkett never bowled a ball in the first innings. I bowled 17 overs on the bounce. Liam Plunkett never bowled one ball in that first innings. I think he was myself, Plunkett, Graham Onions. I don't know if Callum Thorpe played. Callum Thorpe might have been the fourth seamer. Um, and Scott Styrus might have played as well, I think. And we
Mm.
kept picking up wickets. I kept picking up wickets all the time. And then we get to like 8 down, and I've bowled about 14 or 15 overs on the bounce, but it's not consecutive because we've had all these stops for rain and stuff like that. Um, and then we came back out again after another break, and I said, "Look, man, I've done my job now. You know, give somebody else the ball or whatever." And he says, "Well, you've got 8 wickets. You might never get a chance again to get all 10. So why don't you just carry on?" And I'm like, "Well, I wasn't going to tell him no. You know." I said, "Oh, fine,
Yeah.
sure, I'll carry on then." Uh, and then we came out. I got a wicket, um, and the batsman was um, somebody called Bruce. Probably was the last wicket to fall. I think he
Yeah.
was a seamer from
James
Hampshire.
Bruce. James Bruce.
James
Yeah.
James Bruce was the batter. So I've met him halfway to the boundary, and we're walking, coming in, and I'm like having it. I don't know if I went all that way to see him, but I've shouted to him. I said, "Mate, come on, let's not be silly now. Let's all be a part of history." Just jokingly, you know. and I ran up and bowled this ball, and he just played down the wrong line. I think he might have bowled him, played down the wrong line and got bowled. There it was. I had all 10 wickets. Absolutely unbelievable.
Not a bad
Yeah, that
effort.
was
Yeah, not a bad effort for a little boy from Spring Head, and
a,
quite
a 38-year-old boy from Spring Hill at that time.
absolutely, Otis. And I think quite rightly, you were one of Wisden's 5 cricketers of the year,
Yeah,
and your peers in the Professional Cricketers Association quite rightly nominated you as the PCA Player of the Year. And so, 2 fantastic accolades together
yeah,
with that achievement, 10 for 47. Not many bowlers, certainly in recent times, have achieved that feat. And I know I was lucky enough to watch Michael Kasparovich in
mhm,
2003, twice 9 wickets against Durham, it must be said, at Cardiff, and 9 wickets up at Chesterley Street. And I know the excitement that was going around the fielders, the Glamorgan fielders, that is, that not many players, as I say, can claim to have taken a 10 for. So you you hang up your boots with over 850 first class wickets, and you then become England's bowling coach. Now, as you explained, you've cut your teeth with level 3, with level 4. So you did have another spell from
mhm.
2014 onwards as England's bowling
Yeah,
coach. But back
yeah,
then in 2008, the 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 build up, the lead up, of course, to the Ashes Test at Cardiff in and the Ashes series in
yeah.
2009. So who were the young emerging bowlers within England's ranks that you were working with and passing on all this accumulated wisdom and knowledge?
Well, so 2007, at the end of that season, Peter Moores, I think Peter Moores is in charge of England.
Yeah,
And England are going to Sri Lanka for a one-day series first. And what had happened was that in the period where I was doing the national coaching and so on, the ECB at the academy. Troy Cooley is the fast bowling coach in the academy. Rod Marsh is the head of that academy, and I'm getting in my job as a national coach to go and spend time in and around the academy. The likes of Flintoff and Peterson and all those guys were in the academy at the time, but I'm learning from Troy Cooley about fast bowling coaching. And again, my curiosity is question, question, question. What can I learn? How can I learn? And stuff like that. And so in the summer, I was lucky. In the winter, I was working in the academy, working with Peter Moores. When Troy Cooley and um, Rod Marsh left the academy, then and Peter Moores was involved in the academy at the time. In the winter, I was working in the academy with Peter Moores, developing bowlers, and in the summer, I was playing cricket for England. And then when Duncan Fletcher left England in 2007, Moores gets the job as head coach. Myself and Andy Flower used to be his sort of right hand men, if you like. So Andy Flower got the job as the batting coach, but Andy Flower had stopped playing that 2007 season. Andy Flower had a contract to play for Essex in the season, but he stopped playing and went straight to coaching. I carried on playing till the end of the season. And then at the end of the season, we were going to Sri Lanka in late September. And I went out to Sri Lanka in late September as a consultant, as a fast bowling consultant. And Morsey said, look, there's no guarantees. We'll go and see how it all goes and whatever. Again, Hugh Morris is still the director of English cricket at that time. And we did well over there. I think we won that one day series. It had been the first time that had won a one-day series in Sri Lanka, if not the subcontinent, for the longest while. We did really well out there and won the one-day series. I guess they were impressed with how I sort of conducted myself, but and so on. And then they offered me the coaching roles, So that was 2007, and I started working with England as a bowling coach then full time from sort of like October, November 2007 to 2010.
And that time period, as I mentioned, included the 2009 Ashes Test at Cardiff. How
Yeah.
it I can remember chatting to you there during one of the practice days, and
Mhm.
where the nets, and you just I can remember you just looking around the ground, so different, of course, to your days when you were wearing the
Oh
daffodil,
yes,
and
yes.
Glamorgan now hosting Test cricket, and wow, what a Test match it was! Thanks to Jimmy Anderson and Monty Panesar. Um, can you claim to have given Monty any batting advice? Uh,
I
uh,
might have given him some throwdowns, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. I can't say I've given him any batting advice. Look, that was a unbelievable period. I think because after 2005, the Ashes then with Vaughan and Harmison, Hogarth, Freddie. Steve Harmison was still playing in 2008. He was still around. Freddie was still around. Hogarth had gone. Um, Simon Jones had gone.
yeah,
But then that was the emergence of Broad and Anderson. Um, and those two were the ones. I think I was in New Zealand with the team when Hogarth got left out and Anderson came in as sort of a replacement. And as they say, the rest is history in terms of what Jimmy's and Stuart Broad have gone on to achieve in their careers. But so that was um, when you ask the question about the young people that I was passing on all that knowledge to, then certainly, especially Stuart Broad, perhaps more than Jimmy. I've
yeah,
worked well with both of them, but the interesting thing for me working with Stuart Broad is that I was at Leicester in 2005, I think it was, when he made his first class debut. So I played a season with him at Leicester. Uh, so he was he actually got my Malcolm Marshall moment in his debut game. I was the guy standing at mid-off with him, like Malcolm Marshall did to me, telling him just bowl the ball through to the keeper. And he still got a lot of respect for me, and now we still speak quite often. And I'm just so proud of how what he's gone on to achieve is absolutely remarkable.
absolutely. And to sign off last year in the way you did, I mentioned about your the fairy tale end to your own career, Otis,
Yeah,
and Stuart, very much the same with England. Now, your work with England led then to a spell as head coach of the West Indies. So
yeah.
how was it then heading uh, back home to take over there?
Yeah, so if you remember earlier, I said when I went to Leicester, I said to the people at Leicester, I want to be in a position by the time I'm 40 to be in a position to coach the West Indies. That's the team I was really wanting to coach, and that turned out to be my hardest job in coaching so far was the West Indies job. Because um, I have to say to people quite often, the West Indies doesn't exist as a place on any map. The West Indies is a cricket team. It's not even a football team or anything like that. The West Indies is a cricket team, and that's it. So all the islands are different. Every island is different. It's got its own culture, its own history, its own money, its own politics. Um, you know, uh, so trying to bring them together, cricket is the only thing that's really brought them together. Um, and I experienced that, firsthand when I went back, how difficult it was to get everybody on the same page, and not just the players, getting administrators on the same page is also very difficult. When I went back there, at the time I got back, there were issues with the board and the players. There's always been issues with the board and the players. The players had gone on strike before and stuff like that, and there I was trying to bring them together. I've everything I've done in coaching has been done in the English system, of asking questions, getting people to understand what you're saying, like good communication, and that was a real challenge. A lot of the players and the board were too far apart, in my opinion, at that time, and it made it very difficult to do anything, to get the best out of people, because some people that, in my opinion, some people's hearts weren't in West Indies cricket. By this time, all of our best players are T20 superstars everywhere else. And as a T20 franchise can offer you far more than your country, or your home board could ever pay. So, a lot of our best players opted all time for a franchise opportunity rather than playing a test match, or a test series. So you could never then put your best team out. And the difficulty then comes when, there's no franchise tournaments going on, then those same players want to be back in, and there's SARS. So, one of the things I had to say to the board is you have to ask yourself, do you want a star team or a team of star players? But having said that, with that same team, and for one sort of moment in time, in 2012 we were able to win the T20 World Cup in 2012, which was absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, and I think we all know that the West Indies are not the force that they used to be back certainly in the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s. There would be top West Indian players. We've obviously mentioned the likes of Marshall, Garner, Holding, Richards, etc. in county cricket. And I think what's been interesting is that there have been fewer and fewer West Indian players. Obviously, Shiv Chanderpaul, who you mentioned earlier on, may be one of the exceptions. But I've got a question from Richard talking about county cricket and young West Indians coming in. And Richard, who can't make it this evening, has sent in a question just asking you who are the up and coming young players in the West Indies, maybe for us to keep an eye on, or even county supporters to keep an eye on. I mentioned Shiv Chanderpaul. He's got a very promising son, hasn't he?
He has, yeah, and his son is made it to the West Indies team already. I'm not as switched on to West Indies cricket as I used to be, or perhaps even should be. Obviously, with the nature of what I do now, I don't have as much time to keep a close eye on the young players in the West Indies as perhaps that I should be doing. But the West Indies they've got Darren Sammy now coaching the white ball team. Darren Sammy, he's done fantastically well as a captain in white ball cricket for the West Indies. He's won 2 World Cups, perhaps the only captain to have won 2 World Cups. So.
And also a former Darren had a short and successful spell in T20 cricket with Glamorgan, and I know when my wife and I, luckily enough to go to St Lucia on 3 occasions, and the esteem in which he's held, the Darren Sammy Stadium, Gross Inlet, the facilities there on the up, and surely a lot of good is now happening. So maybe the next generation coming through, and again possibly counties looking to blood young talent, could certainly cast their eyes over the West Indies. Let's talk, going back to your career. So you go back, have a second spell as England bowling coach, and then you have 2 spells as firstly South Africa's bowling coach, and then bowling coach to Bangladesh. Two very, very different, well, two very extremely different countries, two very different
Mm.
environments in which cricket is played. As part of just building up your vast bank of cricketing and coaching experience, what did you take out of your time in South Africa and also then
Um,
in Bangladesh?
sorry, so the South Africa thing was as head coach.
Yeah,
I went to South Africa in 2017 as head coach,
yeah,
and that was I'd of course played 6 seasons there as a player.
yeah,
So I felt like I knew the cricketing landscape quite well. Um, there was a lot of motivation for uh, uh, whether you want to call it a black coach or African coach or whatever. There's a lot of motivation there for a coach of African sort of descent. And I guess when they did their homework and looked around the world, they saw I was in international cricket. I think it would have been myself and Phil Simmons
yeah,
that would have been doing international cricket, and they contacted me and said, we would like to interview you for this job. Would you be keen on it? And I was like, well, actually, I've got a very good job as bowling coach of England, so um, not really. So then they did some interviews. They didn't like the candidates that they got, and then they came back to me again. By this time, I'd had a deeper thought about it. I'd spoken to a few more people, and then I said, well, actually, why not? And that's how that came about, and that was interesting. That was very interesting. So I had a good time there. We I feel like we started to get the team moving. Um, the 2019 World Cup was a disaster for us, but everything leading up to that World Cup had everything gone according to the plan that we had set out. I only had 18 months there. If everything had gone according to the plan that we had set out, then I think that we could have done a lot better in that World Cup, 2019 World Cup. Leading up to that World Cup, AB de Villiers decided to retire. He was obviously mainstay for us. Morne Markle also decided to retire. Dale Steyn got injured. Um, Hashim, fantastic player. Hashim had lost a bit of form. He still came to the World Cup, but then he got hit by Jofra Archer. The first game we played against England, he got hit by Jofra Archer, and then he didn't have a great time with that tournament. We had a wild card in Anric Norkia. We'd sort of identified him as a wild card that we were going to bring over. And then leading up to he was almost selected in the team, and then he broke his thumb, believe it or not, batting in the nets against the bowling machine, and that ruled him out
yeah,
of the World Cup as well. A lot of other things sort of to win a World Cup. If you look at what England did in 2019, you need a lot of things to align for you. The stars need to align for you. If you look at England and the ECB and the decisions that Andrew Strauss made at the time, Jofra Archer was probably not going to qualify in time, so they sort of um, they changed the rules a little bit to make sure that his qualification was before that tournament, so he ended up being available. They had dedicated 4 years to putting together a team and building a team for that tournament. They got the right people in the right places. Um, even in the final, you still need things to align for you. The ball off the back of the back of Stokesy that goes to the
yeah,
boundary. The
yeah,
umpire doesn't quite know the rules. The umpire gives four, and all those things. So for us, things just didn't align for us for that tournament. But leading up to that, we had played actually really well. I think we had won like 70% of the games we played in that 12-month period before that. And also the infamous sandpaper game at Cape Town. I was sitting there in the dugout watching that, not not believing what I was witnessing. So yeah, that was an interesting time.
yeah. I'm apologies for getting your position with South Africa wrong, but you
No, no,
did
it's okay.
no, but you did then go and have a spell in Bangladesh. So
Yes.
again, a completely different culture, a completely different, as you mentioned, infrastructure, um,
Yeah.
different pitches and styles.
Yes. But so by the time I got to Bangladesh, Bangladesh is what happened was I ended up coaching a team in the Bangladesh Premier League. I was head coach of a team in the Bangladesh Premier League, and I was doing all the bowling myself, like working with. And I've always been interested in working with young fast bowlers and developing and making them better. The same way Malcolm Marshall spent time with me and whatever. So I've always had an interest in that. So I'm coaching in the BPL with these young players and some exciting young bowlers there underneath the international team. What happens with then when you get to the international level and you look at the way they've structured teams and the way they pick teams, they only play one fast bowler or maybe
Hmm.
two fast bowlers, but it's just so like the emphasis is on spin, and they win with spin and they make the pitches spin and all the rest of it. And then when teams go there with better spinners than them, and they say, well, we can't play against these spinners, we're going to make the pitches different. The fast bowlers haven't got the body of experience to compete against the opposition fast bowlers. So for the 2 years that I was here, it was nice to be able to develop a real fast bowling culture amongst the fast bowlers. We set up this like elite fast bowling group, and we've got like the best 10 guys. I said, listen, let's get some tall guys. Let's see who we have. Taskin Ahmed came through. Shoiful Islam came through, and we got these guys together, and we started to really. I spent a lot of time with them working on skills, working on creating a mentality in them, gymming and all the rest of it, and they bought into it. To be fair to them, they bought into it, and all of these things, every situation that I've been in, there's always been a highlight, and then the highlight for me would then be Bangladesh, who would, since they came into international cricket. They'd never won, not even a practice game in New Zealand. And we went to New Zealand and we won a test match at Mount Maunganui on a good, it's a flattish pitch. And we won a test match with fast bowling, you know. And that was, to this day, that's still one of my best achievements. One of the things that I go to more than talking about achievements, to be able to instill enough confidence in those guys that they can go out and compete. And in that particular match, outbowl New Zealand and beat New Zealand in New Zealand was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and of course, this was New Zealand post 2019 World Cup and all the glory that they tasted.
Yeah,
Let's
a very
let's
good
just
New Zealand team.
absolutely let's just move on just to finish off before the last couple of questions, Otis, because 2022 you're appointed as head coach at Yorkshire. We all know it's been a
Mm-hmm.
very difficult time for the club,
Mm-hmm.
but we
Yeah,
also know that you are very lucky to have a number of highly talented young players at your disposal. And
yeah.
if you could just share with us some of your experiences so far with coaching with Yorkshire.
Yeah, look, obviously, when the opportunity, I'd been, if you go back over everything since 2007 when I finished playing. I'd been on the road as an international coach that whole time from 2007 to last year, and when the opportunity came at Yorkshire, I looked at it. I looked at what was going on, uh, um, and I was like, I'm not sure. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? But the one thing I knew for sure was that I was ready to get off the road and come home and be a lot closer to my family, Yorkshire is just down the road from here. It's an hour and 20 minutes on a good run. And then the more I thought about it, I spoke to a few people And I decided, yeah, you know what, why not? Things need to change, and why not me be the person to start that change, you know? I know what I'm doing, I think, as a coach. Of course, there's a lot I need to go in there and see for myself and whatever. I went in and I didn't see a lot of the things that I was reading in the newspaper. I got to say that. You know, the dressing room didn't seem as divided as it was being made out to be. The players that I found, you know, were very welcoming to me, and then subsequently to other people that have come into the dressing room, and the environment around the dressing room was nothing like you read in the newspaper, you know. But there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes with Lord Patel and stuff like that, trying to move things in the right direction. A lot of people, the people that didn't feel they could be associated with the club, they moved on, which is fine. But a lot of people still came into the club, and those people that came into the club came with, I imagine, the same intent as me, which was to try and make things better at Yorkshire for the cricketers that were there at Yorkshire, you know. And you know, last season we got relegated, and that was devastating, because that was not part of the sort of three year plan that I had in my mind of how we would shape things and move things back towards a positive sort of outlook. You know, so um, sometimes when you sit down and you look at your squad list, and you see Root and Milan and Bairstow and Brook and all these guys, you think fantastic, but then you hardly ever see those guys. Um, and in the end, last year, what happened, in my opinion, is when we had our best batting at the start of the year, we couldn't bowl teams out. We won one and drew. We had 6 games in 6 weeks. We drew, we won one and drew the next 5 games, simply because we couldn't bowl teams out. We put ourselves in winning positions, but Matt Fisher was injured. Um, Ben Cord was injured, and these are our two best bowlers. So we didn't have our best bowling. And then by the end of the year, um, Brooke had gone on to he was scoring a lot of runs for us, but then he'd gone on with England. But then we had Fisher and Cord at the back end, but we didn't have anybody to make the volume of runs we needed to win games at the back end. So we ended up getting relegated on the last day in the season, and that was devastating. But this year we've had an okay season this year. Again, last year, there was this thing from the ECB about the points deduction hanging over you. At the start of this season just gone, again, that's still hanging over you. So you don't know at what point that's going to kick in, and obviously, of course, the ECB took some points away from us. We didn't do well enough to qualify to get promoted. But next year, everything that we do will certainly be based around trying to get ourselves promoted. And a
Yeah,
lot of things are moving in the right. A lot of things are moving in the right direction. There are a lot of good young players there. Finley Bean had a fantastic season. Just fell short of 1,000 runs by night 17. I think Adam Lyth made 1,000 runs. George Hill, um, you know, uh, Revis, just to name a few of the players that have really stood out this year. And next year promises to be a very exciting year for Yorkshire fans.
yeah, and you have signed a very promising young spinner from Surrey in Dan
Yeah,
Moriarty.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure. He's going to be a very good addition to our team. Um, you know, you have to try and have enough pieces that will help you to win cricket matches. Most of the focus on county cricket is on the first division. But the second division is also some really good talented cricketers in the second division, and getting out of the second division is almost probably harder than winning the first division. So our job next season is to really try and see if we can get out of the second division.
Absolutely, and I know if Yorkshire and Glamorgan both get promoted next year, then we'll both be very
What
we'll both be very
correct?
happy. And I have to say one of the finest games of cricket I was fortunate enough to be working at and to witness this year was the Titanic game at Headingley, which went to the
Headily.
final ball. Michael Neese's outstanding hat trick, and I think the eyes of the world were on the coronation of King Charles, but at Headingley there was some.
Yeah.
What a game of cricket! Marnus Labuschagne getting 100, and
Yeah.
what when a game of cricket goes down, the last pair at the wicket, and it goes to the final ball. We talked about the Ashes Test of 2009, but that game at Headingley was up there. Otis, I've got two final questions to ask you. And Peter, who again couldn't be on the call this evening, Peter's sent in a question saying, given England's demise in the current World Cup taking place in India, based on what you've seen in county cricket over the last couple of years, who do you think might be the new faces who could be blooded and could form the backbone of an England team in the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, look, I think everything works in cycles, as you know, and of course, this England team has had a good run for the best part of 8 years. If you look back at when Owen Morgan started in 2015 with this group, you know, so you've got the likes of I like there's a boy at Surrey called Will Jacks.
Yeah.
I like him. And there's another boy there. I think he's called some Smith. The two young
Jamie
batters there.
Smith keeps wicket. Yeah,
Jamie,
as well. Yeah.
Jamie Smith and Will
Yeah.
Jacks. I think they're two fantastic cricketers. I think they've already got a good one in. So Surrey's got three. They've got Jacks, they've got Smith, and they've got Atkinson, who's there with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And they've also got Tom Curran. Yeah, Tom
Yeah.
Curran will play a lot of cricket for England going forward. You know, you've got those guys. Rayan Ahmed possibly is a replacement for Adil Rashid in that leg spinning role. But we've also got a young boy at Yorkshire called Jaffa Chauhan.
Yeah.
He did well in the T20 Blast for us last year. You know, the real holes to fill will be who will replace Josh Butler as a keeper, as an outstanding keeper batter. It might well be Jamie Smith. It
Yeah.
might well be him. You know, and then finding some quality fast bowlers. Worcester has what's the fast bowler from Worcester that just gone to Lancashire now, but he doesn't
Josh
stay
Tongue,
fit.
who's gone to Notts.
Josh Tongue's gone to Notts.
Yeah.
You know, this other fast bowler from Worcester that's gone to Notts now. He bowled quite quickly in the
Dylan Pennington. Yeah.
He's up. No, Pennington's gone to Notts as well. There's another guy.
Yeah.
He'll come to me. But he doesn't stay fit long enough.
There's Mitchell Stanley, I think, is the guy you're thinking of.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah, Mitchell Stanley.
Yeah.
I've been impressed with him. He can ball quickly.
Yeah.
And he plays mostly white ball cricket. So he's got a chance. The likes of Jofra Archer with his elbow injury and stuff like that. Is he going to be around in 4 years' time for another World Cup? You know, we don't know that. The one thing I do know for sure is that there's enough talent in county cricket that if you look back at 2019 when Morgan when he started that whole process with Andrew Strauss, the one thing they started to do was pick the right people, and if we get the right people from now, there's no reason why in 4 years' time that the team won't have been together long enough and playing enough cricket together to be able to go and put in a good showing. I think everybody will, not least the players themselves, will be disappointed with what they produced so far out in India.
Yeah, just two other names just to throw in the mix. There's a highly promising keeper at Somerset, James Rue, who gets runs almost for fun, and the top of the order white ball specialist Will Smead. I don't know how much you've seen of those
I,
two.
Smead is at war as at Somerset, isn't he?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, I've come across Smead before.
Yeah.
So, you know, my feeling is this in T20 cricket, because Smead has gone on to Smead is only how he's a young boy, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's opted for a white ball contract already.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, that would tend to want to he wants to go down the franchise pathway. That's his um decision to make. I'm fine with that.
Mm.
But I think if you look at this is how I look at sort of 50 over cricket, because 50 over cricket is at a crossroads at the minute. Because if you look at the guys playing in the World Cup at the moment, most of them don't play 50 over cricket. The only time they play 50 over cricket, they don't even want to play some bilateral series. In some of the bilateral series, the likes of Joe Root and those guys opt out to go and play franchise cricket.
Mm.
And England send a B team. Now you're sending the best players or the T20 players to play 50 over cricket. And then they get in bowled out in 30 overs, and you're wondering why, because these guys are accustomed to scoring at 10 and 12 and over in T20 cricket. But 50 over cricket, I still think like some of your best red ball batters, I think, should be capable, should be the people especially at the top of your order in 50 over cricket. So the likes of Zach Crawley,
Mm.
who scores at better than a runner ball in Test cricket, Zach Crawley should be a crossover T20 player. Ben Duckett should be a crossover T. So when you're looking around for the next set of players, you don't have to look further than Crawley and Duckett and those guys, because they're doing it. They're doing that already in Test cricket.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah.
So the likes of Zach Crawley, I like Zach Crawley. So the likes of Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett, those are your next group of 50 over batters, I think,
Yeah.
because those are your you still have in 50 over cricket, you still have to have the basis of a good technique. So this is where I think for somebody like Smead, for instance, Smead is a hitter, not a batter. In 50 over cricket, you can start as a batter and then you can hit when you have to hit. But if you go in and you don't have the technique to bat first and you want to hit from ball one in 50 over cricket, you end up like seeing with teams getting ball out in 30 overs and with 10
Mm.
overs to spare and stuff like that, I think.
Yeah. And we mustn't forget Harry Brook has to feature in
Oh,
there.
well,
I can remember watching him, whether it was 2020 or 2021. He got 50 uh, against Glamorgan, and I, in the same way, when I saw Jamie Smith for the first time, when I saw Will Jacks for the first time, there was that sprinkling of gold dust, and it must be very very comforting for you, Otis, to know that you're going to be playing a leading role in helping to shape the New England team. The final question that I've got to finish on this evening,
yeah.
and it's come from Duncan Evans, who I said uh, can't be with us this evening, but he knows, and as you've mentioned throughout the last couple of hours, you've played all over the world. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you've coached all over the world, but
Mm-hmm.
what is your favorite ground? If you had to single out one place above all,
Yeah.
your most
Mm.
favorite ground in the world, where would it be?
Cape Town, New
Yeah,
Orleans and Cape Town.
right.
Backdrop, atmosphere, um, good pitch to bowl on and bat on. You can make runs there as well. Um, yeah, that with the mountain in the background. Sometimes you're sitting there and it's a beautiful day in the morning, and then in the evening the tablecloth comes over. When the clouds come in, the pitch for some reason sort of livens up a little bit in the afternoon. I just think Cape Town with that backdrop is a beautiful place. I enjoy playing in Barbados as well as my home ground. But But Cape Town, I've always found Cape Town, whether I'm playing or sitting in the dugout, sitting in the dressing room, coaching, as a special place.
Absolutely. Well, Otis, for the last 2 hours, we've listened enraptured to your career. Not as you said, you began life on a sugarcane tenement in in a small holding in Spring Head in Barbados. Dreams,
Mhm.
aspirations of making the grade as a cricketer. I've always said during my teaching career to the youngsters I've been in charge with, if you aim high, you never know where it may take you. And Otis, you've
Yeah.
been very honest, very eye-opening, very illuminating, and on an evening where the nights are drawing in, you've brought some Caribbean sunshine to yes, you have, my friend. And I know
Uh,
we're all very grateful for that. Just a reminder to everyone that we haven't got to wait too long for the next museum talk. It's on November the 9th. Colin Ingram is going to be having a chat, and we're going to be hearing about Colin's career again all over the world as a batter. So thanks very much, Otis. Thanks to everyone. Stay on the line, though, Otis. I'm just going to stop the recording now because, as I say,
yeah.
this a copy of this will be appearing on the Glamorgan website fairly soon. So many thanks, Otis, for an absolutely fascinating evening.